The cousin's wedding reception was supposed to be a celebration. 200 relatives, white linen tablecloths, centerpieces with soft ivory roses, and a dance floor that wouldn't fill up until after the toasts. It was supposed to be one of those warm April evenings you talk about for years.
And it was.
Just not in the way anyone planned. My father stood up from his table about 40 minutes into the reception, before the main course, before the cake, before anyone had a reason to stop smiling. He pointed at me across the room the way you point at something you want other people to be embarrassed by. And then he said the words he had apparently been saving for exactly this kind of audience. He called me a liar. Not quietly, not as an aside to the person next to him. Out loud, in front of every aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend who had spent years watching him treat me like I was a guest in my own family rather than a member of it. What he did not know was that a sealed envelope was already moving through that room. A young waiter in a black vest was carrying it on a small tray, weaving between tables, heading in our direction. My father was still talking when that envelope left the back office. He was still performing for the room when it got within 20 feet of us. And before the dessert plates were ever cleared, that envelope closed every argument he had ever started with me. But to understand why that moment landed the way it did, you need to know what the years before it looked like. You need to know about the birthday that passed without a party while my brother got a bounce house and a sheet cake. You need to know about the savings account that was quietly redirected and the name I was called every single time I asked a reasonable question about our family's finances. You need to know why I walked into that reception hall already carrying proof, and why I had made the decision months earlier to stop defending myself with words. Hold on to 4 questions as we go back to the beginning. What exactly did my father accuse me of lying about, and how long had that accusation been building? Was there already someone in that room who knew the truth and had chosen silence? What was inside the envelope, and how did it end up on a waiter's tray at my cousin's wedding? And after everything landed on that white linen tablecloth in front of everyone we had ever known, what did I actually decide to do next? My name is Rachel. I am 31 years old, and I grew up in a 4-bedroom house on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, with a family that had a ranking system as clear and fixed as an org chart on a wall. My father, Dennis, ran a small commercial landscaping company that serviced office parks and retail strips across Franklin County. He was good at his work and he knew it, and he brought that same energy to the dinner table every evening, treating every conversation like a meeting where only one person's report actually mattered. He did not ask questions. He issued conclusions. And if you pushed back, even gently, even with evidence, he would look at you the way a manager looks at an employee who has misunderstood their role. My older brother Marcus was Dennis's co-pilot in every sense. His backup, his reflection, the son who absorbed our father's worldview like it was sunlight. Marcus learned early that agreeing with Dennis was not just the path of least resistance. It was the path to everything: the car keys, the praise at dinner, the college fund conversations, the easy laughter on weekend mornings when the rest of us were still quiet. My mother, Carol, loved us both. I want to be clear about that because it matters later. She loved us, but she had spent the better part of 2 decades practicing the particular skill of looking slightly to the left of whatever Dennis was doing when he got loud. She was not cruel. She was tired in a way that had become permanent. And then there was me, the younger one, the one who asked too many questions. Dennis once described me to a neighbor while I was standing close enough to hear as the complicated one. And he said it the way you describe appliance that works but requires more maintenance than you expected. I still have the birthday card he gave me when I turned 12. A plain white envelope with a single $10 bill inside and no signature. That same year, Marcus got a party with a rented bounce house and a sheet cake from the bakery on Broad Street. I kept that envelope. It sits in a drawer in my apartment right now. It taught me something early that took me years to fully understand. Proof matters more than feelings, and objects tell the truth long after people have revised their stories. What pattern had already been laid down by the time I was old enough to name it? By the time I was 15, I had collected enough memories to understand that I was not imagining the gap. This was not a matter of perception or sensitivity or the kind of sibling rivalry that families laugh about at Thanksgiving. The gap was real, it was consistent, and it followed a pattern that repeated itself with the reliability of a schedule. The first memory I return to is from 7th grade. I won my school science fair with a project on water filtration that my science teacher later said was one of the strongest entries she had seen in 8 years of judging. My father sat through the entire awards assembly without once looking up from his phone. He drove me home afterward and said the traffic on Broad Street was worse than usual. That was the conversation. 2 months later, Marcus won a regional wrestling match. Dennis rented a party bus for 12 of Marcus's friends, posted about the win on Facebook every day for a week, and framed the bracket on the wall of his office at the landscaping company where it still hangs today. The second memory is from my senior year of high school. I was accepted to Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship. I came downstairs that morning with the acceptance email printed out, and my father looked at it, looked at me, and said that must be a mistake. Those schools let in anyone now. He went back to his coffee. That same week, Marcus was accepted to Columbus State Community College, and Dennis took the entire family to a steakhouse in Dublin to celebrate. We had the back room reserved. There were balloons. The hidden cost ledger I started keeping in a plain notebook is not dramatic. It is just accurate. Piano lessons I asked for 3 years in a row that never materialized while Marcus had a guitar and an amp in his bedroom. The car Dennis bought Marcus at 17 that I was told I needed to save for on my own. The $2,000 my father borrowed from my first real paycheck after college, borrowed being his word, with a promise to return it that never came. I added it up carefully over time. The number landed at approximately $11,000. The 20 years of being told my memory was unreliable and my version of events was the dramatic one, that part does not have a number. One thing shifted quietly in my favor during those years. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, was paying attention. She had not said anything yet, but she noticed. How far was my father willing to take his version of me before something in that version finally broke? The trigger was my cousin Bethany's wedding, scheduled for the second Saturday in April at a reception hall in Westerville, about 20 minutes north of Columbus. Bethany is Marcus's age and has always been one of those people in an extended family who manages to be genuinely kind without making a performance of it. She remembered my birthday without being reminded. She asked real questions when she saw me at holidays. When her invitation arrived in the mail, it felt like exactly what it was, a sincere one, and I accepted without hesitation. 3 weeks before the wedding, my father sent me a text message. I screenshot it within seconds of reading it and saved it in a folder I had already created on my phone labeled Simply April. The message said that he hoped I was not planning to bring up old family business at the reception, and that if I started making things uncomfortable for the family, he would make sure everyone there knew exactly what kind of person I really was. He used the word everyone twice. That is not an accident when someone writes a message like that. They are telling you the size of the audience they have already been imagining. I read it twice. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. And then I did something that my father, who had spent 31 years believing I was the complicated one, never once anticipated for me. I picked the phone back up and made a call to a DNA testing laboratory in Columbus that I had already researched, already contacted, and already submitted a sample to 3 weeks before his text message arrived. His warning did not prompt my plan. His warning arrived after my plan was already in motion. I had not been waiting for him to threaten me. I had been waiting for the right room and the right number of witnesses. For years, my father had built his version of our family story on the confidence that I would either stay quiet or lose my composure when I finally spoke. He had never once considered the third option, that I would show up prepared, calm, and patient enough to let the evidence do the work I had been exhausting myself trying to do with words. Who was the one person I trusted enough to tell what I was carrying into that reception hall before the wedding day arrived? My Aunt Patricia was the person I called that same evening after I read my father's text message. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she had been expecting to hear from me sooner or later. Patricia is my mother's older sister, and she had been watching my father manage his version of our family story for over 2 decades with the quiet attention of someone who knows that the right moment to speak is not always the earliest one. When I told her what his message said, she was silent for a few seconds, and then she told me that she had something she had been holding on to for a long time, and that she thought it was time for me to have it. She had a letter. It had been written by my grandmother in the last year of her life, addressed to me by name, and handed to Patricia for safekeeping because my grandmother did not trust Dennis to deliver it to me directly. Patricia had kept it in a fireproof box in her home office for 4 years, waiting for what she described as the right circumstance. The letter confirmed something I had suspected across many years, but never been able to demonstrate with anything solid. My father had redirected a portion of my grandmother's estate, approximately $14,000, into a joint account he held only with Marcus. The letter included dates, a partial account number written in my grandmother's careful handwriting, and a sentence that I will not quote directly here, but that made her intention for that money unmistakably clear. So, by the week before Bethany's wedding, I had 3 layers of receipts. Layer 1 was the screenshot of my father's threatening text message. Layer 2 was my grandmother's letter, handwritten and dated, with account details that could be verified. Layer 3 was the sealed DNA results sitting in my apartment, ordered from the Columbus laboratory after years of my father making comments, always casual, always deniable, that suggested I was not quite part of the family in the way Marcus was. While I was assembling those 3 layers, my father was at a pre-wedding family dinner telling relatives that I had been fabricating stories about favoritism for years and that my emotional instability was a pattern the family had learned to manage. Before the wedding day arrived, I have to ask you something honestly. Would you have done what I was preparing to do, or would you have decided one more time that staying quiet was the safer choice? The reception hall in Westerville held 214 guests according to the seating chart Bethany shared with me afterward. Round tables, ivory linens, small candles and glass votives, and a DJ booth near the dance floor that was still setting up when the first guests arrived. It was a genuinely beautiful room, and under any other circumstances, I would have simply enjoyed being in it. My father arrived early. He always arrived early to rooms he intended to own. I watched him from the parking lot without him seeing me, working the entrance the way he had worked every family gathering for as long as I could remember. Handshakes that turned into backslaps. That wide, easy smile that had the particular quality of making every person on the receiving end feel briefly like they were his favorite. He was good at it.
I want to be honest about that.
Dennis was very good at being liked by people who only saw him in short stretches. Marcus was at the head table as one of the groomsmen, relaxed in his tuxedo in the way that people are relaxed when they believe the evening is already arranged in their favor. He waved at me once when I came in. I waved back. Patricia and I arrived at 7:15 and took our assigned seats near the center of the room. Before I sat down, I stepped briefly to the back of the hall and confirmed with the reception coordinator, a composed woman named Diane, that the item I had arranged to have delivered was ready.
It was.
She had it in a manila envelope in the back office, and she knew exactly which table and approximately which time. The first public humiliation came during the cocktail hour. My father was standing near the bar with a group of uncles, and I heard him clearly from 8 feet away say that Rachel has always had a habit of rewriting history when the truth does not flatter her. Several of the uncles nodded. I heard it. I said nothing. Patricia squeezed my arm once, and I let the moment pass. The second came during the salad course when my father stood without being invited and began what was framed as a toast to Bethany, but shifted within 90 seconds into a speech about family loyalty and the particular damage caused by people who invent grievances for attention. Everyone at our table heard it. Some looked at me directly. I kept my eyes forward and my hands flat and open on the tablecloth. Every person in that room was about to face a question they did not know was coming. Were they going to believe the man who had been controlling this family's narrative for 30 years, or the envelope that was already on its way out of the back office? The waiter arrived at our table between the salad course and the main course, exactly as I had arranged with Diane. He was young, maybe 22, and he carried the manila envelope on a small round tray with the kind of steady professionalism that made the whole thing look completely ordinary from across the room. It was not ordinary. Patricia stood first. She had a voice that carried without effort, the kind of voice that comes from decades of being the person in a room who means exactly what she says. She announced clearly to the tables around us that she had something to share before the main course arrived. Conversation at the nearest 4 tables stopped within seconds. My father turned from 3 tables away. I watched his face. The smile did not drop immediately. It held for exactly 4 seconds while his brain worked through what was happening. Then it went. He crossed the room toward our table and addressed the guests around us directly, saying that whatever Rachel had planned was not appropriate for Bethany's evening and that everyone present could see the kind of disruption she had always loved to create. He used Bethany's name deliberately. It was a good move. It almost worked. That was when I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I held up my phone with a screenshot of his text message visible on the screen, and I read it aloud, one sentence at a time, in the same tone I would use to read a grocery list to myself in a store. People leaned in. Some stood slightly from their chairs. Then Patricia opened my grandmother's letter and read it slowly, beginning with a handwritten date at the top, moving through the account details, and ending with my grandmother's signature. The room was very quiet by the time she finished. My father said the letter was fabricated. He said it loudly and with confidence. But 3 of my aunts seated at the table directly beside ours had grown up with my grandmother's handwriting on birthday cards and holiday notes for 50 years. All 3 of them said no, without being asked, almost at the same moment. Then I opened the DNA report from the Columbus laboratory. It confirmed full biological paternity on both sides, completely and without qualification. Every hint, every casual comment, every raised eyebrow he had ever used to make me feel like something less than a full member of my own family had been constructed from nothing. He sat down without finishing the sentence he had started. I looked at him once. I said, "I will not be revisiting this topic with you again." That was the last sentence I spoke to my father that evening. The immediate fallout was not a movie ending. There was no applause. My father did not stand up and confess or apologize or crumble in any way that would have felt satisfying to watch. Real moments do not work that way, and I had not expected them to. Marcus left the reception within 15 minutes of the DNA report being read. He did not speak to me on his way out. He did not look at me either, which told me more about what he already knew than anything he could have said. My mother walked outside to the parking lot and stayed there for 20 minutes. I could see her through the glass doors from my seat, standing near a planter with her arms crossed, not on her phone, just standing. Then she came back inside and sat down in the empty chair next to me and stayed for the rest of the evening. She did not say much. She did not explain herself or apologize or offer a summary of the last 31 years. But she came back inside, and she sat next to me, and after everything that had preceded that moment, it was the most she had offered me in a very long time. Two of my aunts came over and hugged me. One of them cried. I held on to her for a moment and then let go. Bethany found me near the cake table about an hour later. She told me she was sorry that her wedding had become the setting for all of this. I told her that her wedding was exactly the reason I had finally had 200 witnesses in the same room at the same time, and that I was grateful to her for that, even if it was not what either of us had planned. My father did not leave immediately. He sat at his table for another 40 minutes, which was the most painful consequence I could have arranged for him without arranging anything at all. He simply had to sit there in that room with everything now visible. The following Monday, I consulted with an estate attorney in Columbus about the $14,000 referenced in my grandmother's letter. That process is ongoing, and I will not say more about it here than that. I did not post anything online that night. I did not call anyone to celebrate. I drove home, made tea, and sat at my kitchen table in the quiet. The loop that had been open since I was 12 years old with a plain white envelope and a single $10 bill, while my brother had a party with balloons and a bounce house, that loop was closed. What does a life actually look like when you stop spending your energy defending your own reality to people who were never going to believe it anyway? In the 3 months since the wedding reception, I have made changes that are not dramatic in the way people might expect from a story like this. There was no single morning where everything felt resolved. It was quieter than that and more permanent. I blocked my father's number the Sunday after the wedding. I have communicated with him since then only through the estate attorney, which is the appropriate channel for what remains between us now. That boundary did not feel like a dramatic act when I put it in place. It felt like finally setting down something I had been carrying with both hands for years. Marcus sent me one text message about 2 weeks after the reception. It said that I had embarrassed the whole family and that he hoped I was satisfied. I read it once and did not respond. There was nothing in that message that required an answer from me. My mother has called me every Sunday since that evening in Westerville. She does not call to discuss what happened or to process it or to explain herself. She calls to talk about small things mostly, the weather, a show she is watching, a neighbor's new dog. I have answered every time. I do not know yet what that becomes, but I am willing to find out at the pace it needs to go. Patricia and I have dinner on the first Thursday of every month now, usually at a quiet Italian place near her house in Bexley. She had my grandmother's letter professionally framed and gave it to me at our second dinner. It sits on the shelf in my kitchen next to the plain white birthday envelope from the year I turned 12. I look at both of them sometimes when I am making coffee in the morning. Together, they tell the same story from opposite ends. One shows what I was given. One shows what was taken. Both are true, and both are mine now. I enrolled in a graduate program in social work at Ohio State in the fall semester. I had been postponing that decision for 3 years, telling myself the timing was not right, when what I actually meant was that I was spending too much emotional energy on a family argument that was never going to be resolved through arguing. My support system is small and solid. Patricia, 2 friends from my undergrad years who never stop checking in, my therapist in Columbus who I have been seeing for 18 months, and Bethany, who texts me on random Tuesdays for no particular reason, which is its own kind of grace. One final loop closes here, and I want you to know it because it matters. The person who carried the manila envelope out of the back office and handed it to the waiter that evening was not me. It was Patricia. She had coordinated it with Diane while I was parking the car. All I had to do was be ready to stand up when the moment came. It turns out that after 31 years, being ready to stand up was enough. The lesson I carry out of that reception hall in Westerville is not about revenge. I want to be clear about that because I think it would be easy to watch what happened at that table and call it payback. It was not. Revenge would have felt different. What I felt when my father sat down without finishing his sentence was not satisfaction at his pain. It was the specific and unfamiliar relief of no longer having to hold something alone. The real lesson is about the difference between defending yourself with your voice and defending yourself with evidence that does not need your voice at all. For years, I tried to correct my father's version of me through every available channel. Conversations that went nowhere. Patience that he read as weakness. Silence that he read as guilt. Achievement that he minimized before I could feel proud of it. None of it landed, not because I was doing it wrong, but because his version of me was never actually about me. It was about what he needed me to be so that the rest of his story held together. The scapegoat is not chosen because of who they are. They are chosen because of what the family needs someone to absorb. I absorbed it for 31 years, and I want you to hear me say clearly that that was never a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of his architecture. The DNA report did not change who I am. I knew who I was before that envelope was opened. It only changed the room's ability to keep ignoring what had always been true. That is all evidence ever does. It does not create the truth. It simply makes the truth harder to talk over. If you have ever sat at a table where someone delivered a confident lie about you while the people around them nodded along, you already understand exactly what it felt like when that envelope landed on the white linen. You know the weight of it. You know what it means to finally stop being the only one in the room who knows. I would love to know in the comments whether you would have waited as long as I did or whether you would have opened that envelope much sooner. Tell me honestly. Stay for the next one. It gets even quieter before it gets clear.